For decades, the royal family's deepest shadows were locked behind marble walls and whispered protocols. But in a shocking turn, a sealed DNA test linked to Princess Diana herself has detonated at the very heart of the monarchy. And at the center of the storm, Princess Anne, left trembling in tears as Diana's final long-buried secret comes to light. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The first whispers didn't come from the press. They came from inside the palace itself. A sudden, frantic tension swept through royal corridors as word spread that a classified DNA report, one believed to have been sealed forever, had resurfaced. Courtiers stopped mid-sentence, phones went silent, doors that were usually open snapped shut without explanation. Within hours, an emergency briefing was called at Buckingham Palace. Not a routine meeting, not a ceremonial discussion. This was urgent. Faces were pale, voices were lowered. Every person in that room understood one thing clearly. This was not about gossip or reputation. This was about blood, about legacy, about a truth that could not be undone once exposed. And then came the moment no one was prepared for. Princess Anne, long regarded as the unbreakable pillar of royal discipline, was handed the report. Those who witnessed it later spoke in hushed tones, describing how her hands began to shake as she read. The room held its breath. Seconds stretched unbearably long. Then, without warning, Anne broke down. Tears fell. Her composure collapsed. A woman who had weathered decades of royal storms was suddenly overwhelmed by something far deeper than scandal. This was not surprise alone. This was recognition, because the DNA test did not exist in isolation. It reached backward through time, threading itself into a private decades-old conversation between Anne and Diana, one that had never been recorded, never acknowledged, and never forgiven. A conversation where Diana, fearful yet resolute, hinted at a truth she said could destroy everything if it ever came out. In private letters exchanged in carefully guarded secrecy, Diana had alluded to a final secret, not an affair, not a betrayal of marriage, something far more dangerous. Something rooted in identity itself. Anne had always believed it was a warning meant to die with Diana, a burden she carried out of loyalty, not certainty. Now that burden had weight, scientific weight, irrefutable weight. As panic rippled outward, palace staff were ordered into silence. No statements were prepared, no denials issued. The usual machinery of royal crisis control simply froze. The absence of an official response only deepened the sense that this was unlike anything the monarchy had faced before. Behind closed doors, fear replaced protocol. Because if this DNA test was real, and everything suggested it was, then Diana's secret was no longer a rumor or a memory. It was proof, and proof changes everything. But to understand why this DNA result shattered, and perhaps more than anyone else, we must go back to a pact made in the shadows between two royal women bound by blood, duty, and betrayal. They were never meant to be allies. Diana, the radiant rebel, and Anne, the stoic traditionalist, but behind palace doors, they forged a silent alliance. One built on shared suffering, institutional betrayal, and a vow to protect one devastating truth. Until now, in the early 1990s, when tensions within the royal family were reaching their boiling point, Diana and Anne found themselves circling the same silent pain. To the world, they appeared worlds apart, Diana with her emotional vulnerability, Anne with her granite resolve. But in private, they began to meet in moments carved out from public life. Moments where the mask slipped and the burdens of royal blood were laid bare. These secret meetings weren't scheduled, they weren't announced. They simply happened quietly, out of view, and filled with confessions no one else was ever meant to hear. It was during one of those clandestine conversations that Anne finally broke her silence about Charles. Not just the well-known affairs or the emotional distance, but something far deeper. She revealed his cold political calculations, his obsession with legacy, and his willingness to sideline anyone, even family, who didn't align with his vision for the crown. It wasn't bitterness. It was disillusionment, and Diana listened, her own pain mirrored in Anne's rare vulnerability. Then Diana said something Anne would never forget. With a quiet but chilling certainty, Diana leaned in and whispered that she had reason to believe the bloodline might not be as secure as the firm believed. She didn't elaborate. She didn't offer names, only a cryptic warning that if the truth ever came out, the monarchy would never be the same. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded prepared, as if she'd already taken steps to ensure that one day someone would know. From that moment, their relationship changed. What had been quiet sympathy turned into a bond of trust. They began exchanging letters, handwritten, careful, coded. They shared fears about the institution, about their children, about the futures that were being written for them without consent. And in the margins of those letters were fragments of a deeper truth, a truth they both knew could never surface while they were alive. Then came the conversation that would haunt Anne for decades. "If anything happens to me," Diana whispered one rainy evening after a family event, "you must protect it, the truth. You'll know when the time is right." Anne nodded, believing it was a vow she'd never have to honor. But when Diana died just years later, that promise, once vague and distant, became a burden Anne would carry in silence. She never spoke of it, never hinted at it again, but she never forgot either. Years passed, time layered over the pain. But now, with the DNA test in her hands, Anne realizes Diana never spoke in riddles. She spoke in warning, and what was once a haunting memory had become scientific fact. Cold, undeniable, and ready to shatter the crown's foundation. But even Anne, fiercely loyal, endlessly composed, never imagined that the secret Diana trusted her with would be scientifically confirmed and unleash a chain reaction the monarchy might not survive. It was never supposed to be seen again, commissioned in secret, buried in archives, and marked with a royal seal of discretion. But one anonymous whistleblower ensured Diana's DNA test didn't remain buried, and what it reveals changes everything we thought we knew. The test itself wasn't standard procedure. It wasn't part of a hospital visit, a health scare, or an official investigation. According to palace insiders, the origins trace back to Diana's final years, a time marked by deep isolation, growing suspicion, and a profound fear for her life. She had begun confiding in a private circle of medical experts and aides, ones not affiliated with the firm. Among them was a royal physician who over time became more than just a doctor. He became a believer. He saw what she saw, that the royal establishment was not just a gilded cage, but a machine capable of silencing truth. It was under his advisement, sources claim, that the DNA test was conducted quietly, carefully. Outside of royal channels, there were whispers that Diana had insisted on one sample in particular, taken discreetly, stored securely, and never to be revealed unless she didn't make it. It was her insurance policy, her final line of defense against a system she no longer trusted. But when tragedy struck and she died in that Paris tunnel, the test didn't emerge. It disappeared. And that's where Anne entered the picture again. In the chaos following Diana's death, when secrets were being erased and legacies were being rewritten, Anne was allegedly approached by the same rogue physician. He told her the test existed. He told her what Diana had planned, and most of all, he told her that the result was dangerous because it contradicted the royal narrative. Anne, still grieving, still burdened by the promise she made, agreed to have it sealed, not destroyed, sealed. The report was hidden in a royal archive under coded classification. One copy, no backups, no digital trail, and for over 2 decades, that test remained untouched until now. An anonymous source, believed to be a former staff member of Diana's private team, stepped forward with a shocking confession. They had kept a duplicate, not the full file, but enough. Enough to identify that the original test existed, enough to name the physician, enough to match signatures, enough to light a fuse no one could extinguish. The leak was timed, deliberate, and undeniable. The bombshell. The DNA test confirmed there were inconsistencies in one royal child's genetic profile. Inconsistencies that could not be explained by error or chance or anomaly. They suggested something far more significant, something that called into question the legitimacy of a direct royal heir. The ramifications were immediate. Questions about succession, questions about legitimacy, questions about every royal protocol, law, and inheritance clause tied to blood. And while the monarchy tried to contain it, to spin it, to silence it, the damage was already done, because this wasn't speculation anymore. This was science. And it pointed to a deception at the very heart of the firm. But the true shock wasn't just scientific, it was emotional, and the moment Anne saw the result, everything collapsed. For a woman known for iron composure and unwavering discipline, the image of Princess Anne, trembling, sobbing behind closed doors, has shaken even her fiercest critics. What did she see in that report that broke her so completely? The palace is no stranger to crisis, but nothing prepared its walls for the sound of Princess Anne breaking. It didn't happen during a public address or under the harsh glare of flashbulbs. It happened privately in a dimly lit royal study, surrounded by the few aides she trusted, as she clutched the papers that confirmed what she had long tried to forget. Witnesses later described her as visibly shaking, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she reread the test again and again. The woman known as the monarchy's unshakable rock gutted, sobbing, completely undone. She refused to speak to anyone, not Charles, not Camilla, not even William, who reportedly came to check on her. Doors remained locked, curtains were drawn. The silence surrounding her became suffocating, but she wouldn't let go of the document. She demanded the original refuse to accept summaries or second-hand reassurances. "I need to see it," she reportedly said again and again. And when she did, the weight of the confirmation shattered her. Anne wasn't crying because of what the DNA revealed. She was crying because deep down she had known. Not in the way facts are known, but in the way that instinct tugs at the heart. She had always feared Diana's warnings weren't just paranoia. That the whispers they shared weren't just fears, they were foretellings, and now those fears had come alive on paper. To a single trusted aide, Anne broke her silence. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I swore to protect her, and I failed." The words weren't loud, but they carried more grief than any scream. Her breakdown wasn't rooted in the scandal now racing toward the monarchy. It was rooted in guilt. Guilt that she hadn't fought harder, that she hadn't opened the envelope earlier, that she hadn't stopped the machine that ultimately crushed the only person brave enough to tell her the truth. Her tears carried the weight of not just a sister-in-law lost, but a responsibility abandoned. She wasn't just mourning Diana again, she was mourning her own inaction, but it didn't stop at guilt. There was something else behind those tears, something darker, fear. According to an insider, Anne muttered through her sobs, "The crown will never recover from this." It wasn't a question. It was a sentence. She knew what this meant, not just for her brother, not just for Harry, but for the entire institution. The lie at the center of the monarchy had been exposed, and there was no putting it back in the box. But to truly grasp the weight of Anne's guilt, we must dive into what Diana told her all those years ago, and why Anne blamed herself the moment the truth came out. It's the royal secret that no one dared whisper aloud. Until now, Diana's final truth encoded in blood doesn't just expose hidden lineage, it rewrites royal history. And for those still holding power, it may be the beginning of the end. For decades, rumors lingered in the shadows. They were dismissed, denied, and crushed under the weight of royal protocol. But the DNA test stripped away any veil of speculation. The results were undeniable. Prince Harry, long regarded as the younger son of King Charles, was not biologically his. The monarchy built on centuries of inherited bloodlines was now standing on fractured ground. The son they had publicly presented as legitimate. The prince raised within royal walls had no biological tie to the man who raised him as heir. And this wasn't a casual discovery. Diana hadn't taken the decision to commission the test lightly. A close confidant of hers revealed that in the months before her death, Diana became convinced she was being watched. Her phones crackled with static. Her letters were going missing. Her movements, even when unannounced, were somehow always expected. She feared not just for her safety, but for her truth. That's when she sought out the rogue physician. That's when she initiated the test. Anne, in her grief and sense of duty, had accepted Diana's plea to protect the truth, but Diana had never told her everything. She never revealed the name of the biological father. She only said it would destroy the House of Windsor if it came to light. Anne honored the silence until the test emerged. And when it did, speculation erupted like wildfire. Was this Diana's revenge? A silent strike against an institution that had isolated her, silenced her, and many believed abandoned her. Within palace walls, chaos reigned. Senior advisors scrambled to understand what this meant. Because if Harry wasn't Charles's biological son, then his place in the line of succession became dangerously questionable. More than titles or property, the very legitimacy of the royal lineage was now under siege. Questions flew about inheritance, about previous legal decrees, about the implications for both William and Harry. Every tradition that had once felt immovable was now cracking under the pressure of scientific truth. Beyond the palace, the public fallout loomed like a tidal wave. The monarchy's credibility, already under strain from years of internal fractures, was facing its most existential threat in modern history. If one royal child could be illegitimate, what else had been hidden? How far did the deception go? The media began circling. Parliament members whispered about constitutional implications, and the public grew restless, divided between sympathy and outrage. What made it worse was the silence. The firm refused to address the situation. Every moment they stayed quiet only fueled speculation, and Anne's tearful silence offered no protection. The institution she had spent her life defending was now imploding, and there was no blueprint for how to survive it. As the palace scrambled to contain the fallout, one figure remained notably silent until she wasn't. And when Queen Camilla finally broke her silence, it only made things worse. While Anne wept and Charles retreated, Camilla reportedly erupted. Not in denial, but in cold fury. Her silence ended with one searing comment that left the entire room breathless and left Anne even more shattered. In the hours following Anne's emotional collapse, the palace found itself gripped in a rare and dangerous silence, but it didn't last long. When Camilla arrived at the hastily convened private crisis meeting, her demeanor was anything but shaken. According to multiple insiders, she wasn't surprised. She was furious. And not with the DNA test, but with Diana, with the memory of a woman who, in Camilla's view, had weaponized truth from beyond the grave. She was always reckless. Camilla allegedly spat, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Now look what she's done." The words cut through the tension like a blade. The room went still. Anne, still pale and grieving, stared in disbelief. The wound left by Diana's revelation was still fresh, and Camilla's reaction poured salt straight into it. The tension between Anne and Camilla, always simmering beneath royal civility, reignited in that moment, not as a disagreement, as a battle. Camilla demanded that the palace control the narrative. Her voice echoed off marble walls as she laid out a plan: tight-lipped public responses, confidential damage control, and if necessary, legal threats. She spoke of protecting the monarchy, of containing the scandal, of erasing the doubt before it spread. But it was never just about protection. Behind the polished spin, Camilla's motives were clear. She wanted Harry's place in the line of succession revoked quietly, immediately and permanently. A leaked audio clip shared only with top aides captured her words: "He's not one of us, he never was. It's time we stopped pretending." The implications were staggering. Not only was Camilla willing to weaponize the revelation, she was actively steering the firm toward rewriting history, not to reveal the truth, but to crush it. Palace insiders reported that PR teams were instructed to recast the story as another Diana conspiracy, a fabrication, a delusion, anything to preserve the narrative. But Anne wasn't having it. She stood, eyes still red, and with barely restrained rage, looked straight at Camilla and said, "This isn't about narrative, it's about truth." The room fell silent again. Then Anne walked out, slamming the door behind her. No more discussion, no more diplomacy. For Anne, this wasn't just a scandal. It was the moment the palace crossed a line it could never uncross. But as royal factions clashed inside the palace, the outside world was already catching the scent of blood, and the press was circling like wolves. Whispers became headlines. Leaks became breaking news, and suddenly the palace couldn't contain the inferno. As the media seized on the DNA bombshell, the firm scrambled to spin the unspinnable, and Anne found herself pushed into an impossible spotlight. The moment the test results slipped into the hands of journalists, the royal firewall cracked. Within hours, major outlets were splashing bold headlines across every platform. Diana's DNA bombshell. Is Prince Harry truly a Windsor? Royal lineage in jeopardy? The carefully controlled royal narrative was no longer in their hands. The story had escaped, and the world was watching. It didn't take long before speculation turned vicious. Every pundit, every reporter, every royal biographer had an angle, and they weren't afraid to dig deep. One minute, the headlines questioned Charles' prolonged silence. The next, they questioned Harry's inheritance. Then came the public speculation about who the biological father might be, with old photos and long-dead rumors dredged up and weaponized for views. In the midst of it all, Princess Anne became an unexpected focal point. Some saw her as a hero, a woman upholding a dying promise and defending Diana's truth. Others accused her of betrayal, suggesting she had known for years and allowed the lie to flourish. Talk shows erupted, hashtags trended. The press didn't care about nuance. They cared about the storm, and Anne was caught in the eye of it. But the real explosion came when a single letter, allegedly from Diana's private diary, was leaked to the press. The letter, written in the months before her death, mentioned a truth that would shake the crown to its core, and a secret of blood no one wants exposed. That was all the public needed to connect the dots, the timeline, the motive, the fear. As the monarchy struggled to contain the spiraling fallout, internal pressures mounted. Royal aides begged Anne to make a public statement to calm the storm, clarify the facts, or at least deny the more outrageous claims. But Anne refused. She didn't blink. She didn't waver. "No more lies," she reportedly said. "Let the truth speak for itself." That silence became deafening and destructive. The firm, once a symbol of rigid tradition and control, began to fracture in plain sight. Courtier leaked conflicting statements. Advisors resigned behind closed doors. Rumors swirled that emergency meetings with constitutional lawyers were taking place daily. The illusion of unity was collapsing, and the public saw it. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Outside, the people demanded answers, and in the middle of it all, Anne stood surrounded by noise, pressure, and ghosts of promises past. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. With the press closing in, the public polarized, and the crown under siege, Anne makes a shocking decision. One final act that no one saw coming. In a move that stunned the nation, Princess Anne stepped before the cameras, not as a royal, but as a grieving sister-in-law, a protector who failed. And a woman confronting a truth too powerful to hide. Her confession will be remembered forever. The room fell silent the moment she appeared. No fanfare, no grand procession, just Anne, standing alone, stripped of the usual formality that surrounds royal addresses. There was no script in her hand, only a folded letter creased at the edges from Diana, the very one that haunted her for over 2 decades. And as the cameras rolled, Anne began to speak, not as a member of the monarchy, but as a woman broken by silence. She didn't begin with excuses. She didn't hide behind protocol. She went straight to the heart of it. "Yes," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "The DNA test is real, and it confirms what many have feared to speak aloud. But this is not just a matter of science. It is a matter of trust, of pain, of history." She confirmed what had long been whispered behind palace walls, that Diana had confided in her during those final years. That she had been told something, but not everything, that she had carried fragments of the truth, believing it was better to bury them than unleash a storm. And in doing so, she admitted, she had failed the one woman who trusted her most. "I thought I was protecting the monarchy." Anne continued, "I thought the secret would die with us. I was wrong. Truth does not die, it waits. And when it comes, it demands to be heard, I thought." Then came the moment that pierced every heart watching. Looking directly into the camera, she addressed Harry by name. "You are still my nephew. Nothing changes that. Blood may define lineage, but love defines family, and you will always be family." The impact was immediate. Social media exploded. News outlets went into overdrive. But it wasn't rage that flooded the public. It was emotion. For once, the nation didn't see a princess. They saw a woman who had lost too much, waited too long, and finally chose truth over tradition. Messages of admiration and sympathy poured in. Celebrities, journalists, and even former critics applauded her courage. Some called it the most human moment in modern royal history. Others demanded more transparency, more accountability, but no one could deny this. Anne had changed the tone of the entire crisis. With a single unguarded confession, she had re-entered the narrative from scandal to sincerity. And then, just before stepping away from the microphone, she delivered the line that would be etched into history. "Truth may shake a crown, but it strengthens a people." The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a monarchy at a crossroads, a family forever changed, a reckoning no longer avoidable. But as Anne stepped away from the podium, one final question remained. What would King Charles do now? With the monarchy reeling, the bloodline in question, and the public demanding answers, King Charles faced a decision that would define his reign. Does he deny the truth or embrace the reckoning Diana set in motion from beyond the grave? Inside the palace, the silence around King Charles became deafening. He canceled public appearances, postponed scheduled engagements. His face, once a daily fixture across national broadcasts, vanished overnight. But while the public waited, the real drama unfolded behind locked doors. According to insiders, Charles was torn split between the weight of his crown and the crumbling foundation beneath it. On one side stood Camilla and a council of hardened royal advisors, urging swift control of the narrative, legal damage control, and immediate distance from the DNA fallout. On the other stood a rising tide of emotion, honesty, and the ghost of Diana, now louder than ever. Charles wasn't just navigating a personal crisis. He was facing an institutional collapse. Silent meetings with Prince William intensified, often late at night, away from staff, guarded and grim. Those close to the situation claimed the conversations were emotional, conflicted, and at times explosive. William, caught between his loyalty to the firm and his quiet compassion for his brother, reportedly pushed for transparency. But Charles, always the pragmatist, knew the truth carried a weight that could crush more than just reputations. It could end legacies. Then came the quiet removal, unannounced, unacknowledged, from the official royal succession webpage. Prince Harry's name and position were no longer listed as they once had been. No press release, no public notice, just a silent eraser that said more than words ever could. And with that, speculation became confirmation. The monarchy was rewriting its own rules, whether the people approved or not. Behind the scenes, legal teams were mobilized. Discussions of emergency, constitutional safeguards began circulating. Advisors debated whether royal decrees could override public perception, or whether some secrets were simply too big to bury. A monarch's role, once symbolic, was now at the epicenter of a global scandal, one that refused to fade. Charles found himself standing at a crossroads unlike any other monarch in modern history. One path demanded he cling to tradition, deny the firestorm, and pretend the bloodline remained intact. The other required a leap into the unknown, an open acknowledgement that the very foundation of his lineage had shifted. Neither choice came without cost. And as days turned into weeks, one question haunted every corridor of the palace. Was this Diana's final act of vengeance meant to shake the institution that wronged her, or was it her last gift? A brutal, painful truth meant to set the crown free from decades of deception. Charles had yet to answer, but the damage had been done. As the world watches, one thing is certain. Diana's final secret has changed the monarchy forever, and the reckoning is just beginning. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode.